The story begins with a man named Jason fishing peacefully at the beginning of a December morning. The weather forecast indicated a sunny day, but he sees a storm approaching and decides to leave before it arrives. When he gets home, he tries to open the garage, but cannot. He then gets out of the car and, before entering the house, takes the letters from the mailbox. Inside the house, he notices a letter marked as urgent, but ignores it. He pets Cass, the family dog, and then goes to his room, where his wife, named Anne, was lying down. She says that the children finally let her sleep and asks him how the fishing went, and he says that it was productive. At breakfast, the couple's children, Graham and Ruth, are happy with the treats their father brought. Graham eats while playing, but the internet connection drops, and he tells his father. Jason says that the house must be falling apart, and Anne mentions that the guy who was supposed to look at the house chimney will come tomorrow. He had said that the foundation is sinking and that the only thing holding the house up is the chimney. Soon after, they get ready to buy a Christmas tree, even in the rain, because Jason had promised that to the children. Ruth goes to open the door, but realizes that it is locked. Jason arrives and tries to open the door, but he cannot either. He tries to open the back door, but it is also locked. He then goes to the garage, while the children try all the windows in the house, but none of them open. Jason then kicks the door to break it down, but ends up being pushed back and falling to the floor. Then, more impatient, he goes to the glass windows, takes an iron object, and tries to break them, but even putting all his strength into it, nothing works, and the glass seems to rebuild itself. When trying another window, they observe a light coming from another house and realize that this is not happening only to them. One of the neighbors who was walking passes by the street. They try to get her attention, but she cannot hear them. However, when she tries to enter her house, she realizes that her house is locked and then goes to get help, which leaves everyone hopeful. While they wait for some sign of help, one of the neighbors, named Max, shows a board through the window, questioning whether that would be something from the government. Jason uses the children's board and replies that maybe it is, but questions why. Then, the couple says that it may be for their safety. Another neighbor mentions aliens, and Jason questions whether it would be only them or the whole city, and the couple replies that maybe it is the whole world. Later, during dinner, Jason tells them to stay calm because they are trapped in their houses safely and have each other. When Ruth goes to sleep, she asks her father when help will come, and he promises that it will come at some point. She then says that the rain was to blame and that it looked different, but Jason says it was only rain. When he goes to his room, Anne is more desperate, wondering how that could be possible, and worries about her parents, who live nearby. Jason reassures her, says that they will be fine, and that he needs to show her something. He then opens the wardrobe and shows a gun he had bought. Anne asks how he could have bought a gun without telling her, and talks about the children's safety. Jason says that he was going to tell her and says that he has been having nightmares, through which he had the feeling that they were not safe. He apologizes to her, and Anne accepts and asks him to teach her how to handle it before he puts it away. After that, he uses his drill to try to obstruct the lock of the door, but when he looks through the hole he made, he observes a liquid moving inside. He then breaks the wall and explains to his wife that the rain is creating a barrier around the house, including under the floor. She then invites him to sleep, but he says that what is trapping them there is not human. However, she only turns away and tells him not to tell the children that. Alone, he hears a noise coming from the chimney and goes to investigate, but when he looks up, he sees nothing unusual. The next morning, they wake up and go check if the door is still locked, but to their unhappiness, it is. Graham and Ruth are already awake and unconcerned because they think their parents, in the end, will find a way. Jason then says that in this extreme case, they will need to take some measures. They will have to ration water, energy, and gas because they do not know when they may run out, and that the food can last up to 2 months if they control consumption well. But he reassures them, saying that this was temporary and that everything will be resolved soon. After a week of being trapped, Max informs Jason that the same thing is happening for at least 5 blocks. They then begin communicating through boards. Jason says that he is an engineer, but that at the moment he is unemployed, and Max says that he is a retired dentist. In the end, Max asks Jason if he still has food. Jason replies that he does, and when asking Max the same thing, he replies that he does not, which leaves Jason worried about their situation. 2 weeks pass, and the situation remains the same. Ruth looks at the window while she is drawing, and when she looks at a Santa Claus doll outside, plays with the drops of water that fall on the window and seem to move with her touch. However, her parents ask her not to scratch the window. A month has already passed. Ruth and Graham are in the attic of the house, and Ruth spots what she calls the rain walker and shows it to her brother. She says that he only appears when it is raining. Her brother looks outside, hears a sound similar to a low growl, but does not see anything, and says that she must have seen some animal. During dinner, Ruth mentions that she saw someone through the window, but Graham denies it and says it was only the rain. Anne says that if she spends too much time looking out the window, she will see things that do not exist. But she reaffirms that she really saw someone and says that she thinks she is trying to communicate. Jason, however, becomes irritated and says that she cannot have seen anyone in the street because everyone is locked inside their houses. However, he apologizes to Ruth for raising his voice, but says that this was not the time for little stories. When Christmas arrives, Graham and Ruth decide to give Anne the first tomato sprout that grew from the plant she was cultivating. She becomes emotional while eating the small tomato. Ruth looks through the window and sees the neighbor Max's wife crying and then falling to the floor. She then tells her parents that she needs help. Anne asks Jason to take the children out of the living room because she did not want them to see the scene, and she begins to fear that the same thing will happen to them too. During the early morning, Ruth wakes up to the sound of the rain and goes to the living room to play with her stuffed animals, when Cass sees a shadow pass outside, behind the curtain. After a loud thunderclap, she goes to open the curtains and comes across a woman who appears desperate outside, asking for help. She runs away frightened and finds Jason and tells him what she saw. Suddenly, the woman begins pounding on the door, and Jason sees a knife in her hand and warns the children to stay away. Jason realizes that she is that neighbor who was walking right after everyone realized they were locked in. She screams desperately outside that everyone is dead, asking them not to let them see her and saying that they are already there and that no one will come to help. She then asks for help again, but Jason says there is no way to help. She feels something approaching behind her, and suddenly, some water-shaped creature pulls her. When Jason looks at the street, he sees some creatures moving and taking her into the darkness. Soon after, they see a strong light coming from outside along with a crash, and when it goes out, they no longer see any sign of the woman. Jason closes the curtains and tells his family that they need to have a meeting. He observes Ruth's drawings in her notebook and sees water-shaped creatures. She says that she tried to warn them and that the one she saw seemed friendlier. Jason says that whatever these creatures that are trapping them there are, they are not friendly and that they have to be careful. When they go to sleep, Jason says that now they will need to avoid any visible sign of life in the house, especially when it is raining. Ruth then asks if the monsters are real, and Graham replies that now they are. The next day, Ruth is doing acrobatics with a cloth attached to the ceiling of the house when the walls begin to crack more, and something falls from the top of the chimney. The children call Jason, and when he arrives, he says that it may be the chimney cap, and when he looks up, he can see the outside. Ruth asks why they do not use the chimney to get out, but Jason says that it is already very narrow and that it may collapse under his weight. Then Ruth offers to go because she is lighter and can use her cloths to climb. They accept the idea, and Jason makes a pulley with the cloth to lift her through the chimney. However, when she is climbing, the walls begin to crack more, and she says that she will not be able to pass because there are structures in the way. But she asks him to continue because she is almost reaching the top. Jason continues pulling, and Ruth reaches the outside of the house with her hand. At that moment, the weather begins to change, and the rain begins to fall, and they lower her down. When she comes down, Ruth notices that Cass is not well, and Jason says that her heart medicine ran out. He asks Anne to take the children to the living room, and when she takes them, Jason makes a difficult decision. He becomes emotional about it, and Anne says that he made the right decision. However, Jason says that they need to take care of the body, and Anne mentions that they can use the fireplace for cremation. But Jason says that they can also put her in the refrigerator, so that, if things get much worse, they will have another option. Anne leaves the decision in Jason's hands and leaves the place. Jason then decides to think that the worst can happen, and makes his decision. He decides to burn some remains in the fireplace, but notices a wolf outside. Then, he decides to throw what was left to the animal. The bag falls outside, but when the wolf approaches, a thunderclap frightens it, making it move away. When she is at the window taking care of her plant, Ruth sees the storm approaching again. Jason then begins closing all the curtains, and the family gathers in the center of the house. However, Ruth forgets her plant at the window and goes to get it. When she grabs it, a giant creature appears outside and tries to break the glass. Jason asks her not to move, and Ruth, even frightened, stays still while waiting for the creature to leave. 3 months pass. The family has just had dinner, but Ruth remains hungry. She asks for more food just for that day, but Anne refuses. She runs toward the refrigerator and asks to see, but Anne stops her. Jason then allows Ruth to see the refrigerator, and when she opens it, she realizes that it is empty. Anne also shows the completely empty cabinets. Ruth runs away crying, and Anne weakens at that moment. Jason consoles her, saying that they will get out of that situation, but she says that they will starve to death and that this is reality. Jason guarantees that he would never let that happen, and at that moment, his children arrive, and they all embrace. However, the lights begin to flicker. Jason looks outside and realizes that the wolf had eaten the remains he had left. He then goes to the garage, takes a skateboard and a piece of meat, and begins to assemble something. He then places the invention outside through the chimney, and it is revealed that it is a trap to capture small animals. A fox approaches, and he manages to capture it. But when pulling it, the cloth tears under its weight, and the fox manages to escape. He then makes some adjustments and, this time, places a carrot to attract a smaller animal. A squirrel approaches, and he manages to capture it. They prepare the squirrel and rejoice after so long, without eating any kind of meat. After some time, they also create a plantation, tearing up the wooden floor of the house, and make more traps to capture other types of animals. One day, while they are watching a movie, the power goes out, and they begin to depend on candles during the night. 5 years pass, and their life has changed drastically with confinement. The house is now full of inventions and resources necessary for survival, and the children are now grown. Outside, nature has taken over the city, with vegetation growing everywhere and many animals circulating through the streets. However, Anne realizes that the house is sinking. She tells Jason that the ground is eroding and that what keeps them trapped is also what keeps the house standing. But Jason only jokes about the situation and says that he wants to show something. He then shows a car he had been building for some time, using his engineering skills. He says that there is little gasoline, but that the vehicle can run. The entire family is happy with the father's invention, but Graham says that it is a waste of time. He explains that Jason built a car that cannot go anywhere and asks what the point of it is. However, Jason explains that he has only been preparing for every occasion, since they cannot count on luck, and that he has worked hard to keep the family alive. Graham then leaves the garage in silence. Later, the storm returns. The family covers all the windows, and Jason tells Ruth that she is becoming careless with the house rules, and that those drawings on the window may end up revealing their presence. She, however, says that he cannot take that from her. At that moment, a shadow appears behind the curtain, and something knocks on the door. Jason realizes that the water is entering and heading toward the doorknob. He asks everyone to hide, because the being is going to enter. They hide, and the doorknob is turned, opening the door. The monster enters the house and begins walking through the rooms, looking for people. Anne reminds Jason of his gun and says that she will get it, but Jason asks her not to do that. Meanwhile, Graham observes the house door open and feels tempted to leave. The creature manages to freeze and dry the cultivated plantations. Its claws dig into the floor, almost hitting Ruth, who was hidden underneath. When she looks up, some of the water dripping from the being hits her face. Not finding anyone, other monsters outside let out a growl, calling it, and it leaves. Before the door closes, Graham tries to leave, but Jason stops him, and the door closes. Graham is outraged by this, and Anne hugs him. Ruth drinks part of the water that fell from the monster onto her face, and realizes that it is salty seawater. Suddenly, the rain stops, and the day becomes clear again. Jason tries to open the door, and everyone becomes hopeful that, this time, it is open, but it remains locked, taking away all the hope they had of getting out of there. Later, Anne shows Jason the destruction caused by the being in the plantation. She says that the monster poisoned the soil and contaminated the water. Meanwhile, Ruth rescues a small animal that was caught by the trap, but it ends up biting her. The bite causes an infection, leaving her with a strong fever, and Anne says that she needs antibiotics. They then use the last drops of water they have in the house to give to her. Not knowing what to do to save his daughter, Jason gets into the car and, in an act of despair, begins driving against the garage door several times until he hits his head on the steering wheel and faints for a moment. Anne arrives at the garage and tries to help him. At that moment, he notices some cracks in the floor. He then places an iron bar over the hole and realizes something at that moment. He begins looking for the cracks spread throughout the house, while Anne follows him, asking him to stop. He reaches the bathroom and, after moving the toilet away, realizes that there is a passage through the city's sewer system. Jason explains that it connects all the houses and that he can go to Max's house, where there must be antibiotics. However, he cannot pass through the opening, and Anne says that she can get in and that she will go. Graham prepares some communication equipment, while Jason asks her to be careful. She then enters through the plumbing, and the two lower her with a rope made of cloths tied to her. Anne continues advancing through the sewer until she finds a wall. Jason asks her to come back, but she decides to push it. They hear her scream, and the communication signal with her is lost. Jason tries to pull her back, but realizes that she has detached herself from the rope. However, Graham hears Anne calling again and spots a light coming from Max's house. Anne is already there and informs the family that everything is fine. She then begins looking for the antibiotics, but the rain begins to fall and Graham asks her to be quick. She manages to find several medicines and shows them to the family through the window, while they desperately ask her to come back. At that moment, she hears the sound of the being approaching. Anne hides, and when she tries to flee, the monster notices her presence and begins chasing her. She enters the sewer again and asks them to pull her. The creature appears behind her, and Anne shoots at the being, but the bullets do not affect it. She is then pulled before being attacked. The monster begins to climb through the sewer toward the bathroom, but Jason breaks the wall beside it and drops several pieces of debris over the passage, preventing the creature from reaching them. Anne gives the antibiotics to Ruth to take, and Jason asks about the gun, but she says that she lost it on the way. Jason warns Anne that the creature will return, but that they do not know how many of them there are in the house. Then, he tells her to hide with Ruth and Graham while he remains there, and asks her not to come out of hiding for anything until the rain stops. However, Graham arrives and says that he no longer wants to keep running from these beings, and that they need to try to escape from there, no matter how small the chances are. Anne agrees, because she believes that there is no longer any possible life in that situation, and that they need to escape at any cost. Jason accepts their idea, and together they begin to prepare, using the resources they have in the house for the next time the monsters enter. After preparing everything, the rain begins again. This time, they leave the curtains of the house open to attract the creature. However, Graham hears the sound of it already inside the house. When looking at the bathroom, a large amount of water invades the house from several directions. The water floods the place, and the creature enters. Jason takes the weapon he prepared and goes toward the being, but cannot find it. The creature heads toward Anne, who throws an incendiary container at it. The being then flees in Jason's direction, and he tries to hit it with the harpoon, but ends up missing the shot, and the being attacks him. Anne rescues him while the monster moves under the water. Jason says that they need to go to the attic, because the water level is rising, and Graham says that he will recover the harpoon. Jason trusts him, and Graham dives into the water in search of the weapon. He manages to find it and waits for Jason to open a passage in the upper floor. When he manages to open it, Graham passes through the opening, but the creature tries to attack him. Jason strikes it, preventing it from advancing, while everyone climbs to the attic. When they get there, the family is cornered, while the water continues rising. Jason then prepares the harpoon. They try to activate the trap they had prepared, but realize that they lost the rope used to trigger it. When the water floods the attic, the beast charges toward them. Then, they find the rope that activates the trap, and when the creature reaches the attic, they pull it, making the car engine start and accelerate, which causes the water to be drained. Jason shoots the monster, which is pulled back by the force of the water. However, they are also carried away and descend to the living room. There, Anne tries to open the door to escape, but it is still locked. Jason then uses a knife and, with the creature trapped, threatens it, asking it to open the door. Ruth, however, asks him to stop, because otherwise they will never be able to get out of there. When looking at the being, Jason remembers what Ruth had said about one of the creatures seeming friendlier and trying to communicate. He realizes that that creature is not aggressive and decides to release it. After that, the door opens behind them, and they finally manage to leave the house. Other monsters appear before them, seeming more threatening, but the creature that was inside the house comes out and seems to communicate with the others. The monsters then go away, and the house collapses and sinks into the ground. The storm ends, and Ruth runs outdoors for the first time after years trapped in that house. They observe the state the world is in, and, after so long feeling alone, realize that they will have to look for the survivors who remain and find a new home to live in.